In this video, I'm going to be discussing the team setup layers in sports photo automation. The team setup layers work identical to the player setup layers 9 and 10. So if you've already watched that video, a lot of this is going to be the same. But this video is going to just be showing you how it applies to a team image. Now I'm first going to just hit the Add Team Layer group. If you already know the exact size you want that to be in your document, you can put it in here. And in this case, I know that I want this to be 7 by 5 at 300 pixels per inch. So 2100 by 1500 pixels. And this document itself is 3000 by 2400, so it's 8 by 10 at 300 pixels per inch. So if you are setting up a 8 by 10 300 ppi document, 2100 by 1500 pixels is it's a 5 by 7 aspect ratio, and it's kind of a standard for how to set that up. Now, if you ever find that you have to upscale your team image after you bring in that smart object, you don't want to do that. So if you have to do that to get it to be the size you want, just delete that entire group here. Just throw that away and then bring it in again and bring it in a larger size. If anything, bring it in a little bit too large and then downsize, but don't ever bring it in too small and then upsize. And the reason why is because if you ever upscale that in the document, the actual smart object itself, this size will not change within the smart object. It's only going to change how large it's displayed. So if you do that, it's going to resize your team image to match the size of the smart object, so it would always make it 2100 pixels. But if you're displaying that larger than that, it's going to then upscale that and lose a little bit of quality. Anyway, I'm not going to get too technical into that because I'll probably lose a lot of people anyway. Just know that when you bring that in, don't ever upscale that. Always downscale it or leave it the same size if you don't want to lose image quality in the final product. All right, so moving on. Now that we have this in place, I've already got guides in place where I want it. I just have these here just for reference for later in the video when I show a few other things. But I'm now just going to hit Add Custom Team Image. And this is going to do the same thing as it will do during the batch for how it adds the team image. I'm going to grab the image that's already a 5 by 7 aspect ratio, so this will fit perfectly into this smart object. And when you're setting up your team images, always try to be strategic to where you're setting up the size of your layers, or at least the aspect ratio of your layers to be the exact same as the images you're giving it. So if you want your aspect ratio in your template to be 5 by 7, make sure your team images are also 5 by 7. It's just going to give you a lot less headache. Now, sports photo automation does have two different ways it handles when the aspect ratios are different. You don't want to be relying on those, but it does have to handle those situations because I know for a fact a lot of people are not going to have their aspect ratios match. So it's going to have to do something in those situations. And that's what the difference between alignment mode 1 and 2 is. And I'll show you here what the differences are in those modes with how it handles that situation of mismatching aspect ratios. So this again is a 5 by 7 aspect ratio. And I'm going to bring in an image that's a 3:2, so it's going to be more rectangular. So it's going to have gap on the top and the bottom. So if this is player mode 1 here, or team mode 1, so if I hit Add Custom Team Image and grab this team that's now an aspect ratio of 3:2 and bring that in, you see there's now a gap on the top and the bottom because this image is too narrow as far as the aspect ratio top to bottom is too narrow. So there's two choices. It either has to leave an empty space, or it's going to have to upscale in order to fill that top and bottom gap, but then it will have to crop the left and the right to do that. And if it was the other way around, if our smart object was a 3:2 and we were bringing in a 5:7 image, then it would either have to leave a gap on the left and right or expand it to fill and then crop the left and right. So that's just the choice it has to make. And so I'm going to switch this to, I'm going to undo that. I'm going to switch this to player mode 2 here. Now for the team group, if you switch this between mode 1 and 2 in the name, it'll switch that team mode between 1 and 2. For some of your player alignment modes, don't just try to change the mode by changing that group, because there's other layers in those that need changed as well. So this is only for the team mode to do that. And of course, if you use your drop down mode 2 when you bring it in, it'll bring this in as mode 2. Okay, so now I'm going to add the custom team image. That's the mismatch aspect ratio, but this time we're doing it in mode 2. And in this case, you see that it does fill the entire space, but the left and the right are cropped off. You don't see it here because it is cropped off. And in some images, that's perfectly fine because it may just be extra space on the edge that you don't need anyway. But if we go into this smart object here, again, the smart object is, it's a 5:7 aspect ratio here, 2100 by 1500, 7:5 at 300 pixels per inch. Now if I hit Control T to scale, it will show you the outlines of where the image is. And you can see that this image is off canvas. And if I move this, you see that I can move it, and there are parts of the image that indeed are off canvas and still have information. So that's the part that's being cropped off. And so what you see here, where it's cropped, is exactly what you're going to see in the final design. So that's being cropped off. So just know if your aspect ratio of your images you're putting into your template don't match the aspect ratio of your setup layers, it has to either leave gaps or it has to crop, because that's the only two choices it has. And that's your decision to make when you set this up with mode 1 or 2. And what I suggest is never even put yourself in that situation. Just make sure that if you're purchasing a template that's already got a predefined aspect ratio for that design, then set it up for that, but then make sure you crop all of your images before batching it to that same aspect ratio. If you're setting up your own design, you have a little more freedom, then obviously no camera is going to crop at a 5:7, but you can set your template up to like a 5:7 as we did here and crop all of your images. Or you can just go the other route and set your template up to what your camera crops, let's say 3:2, and you can not have to worry about cropping your images before you run it through Sports Photo Automation. But it's just always easier to make sure that the aspect ratio of your design here matches the images you give it. I probably said that about 10 times here, and I guess that's on purpose because I want to make sure that sinks in, because if I just say it one time, a lot of people won't hear it, or it'll just go right past you. So that's very, very important. Now the next thing I'm going to show you is a team image where there's the team's cutout. That's going to work exactly the same way, just with a little bit of a difference. Actually, not even really a difference. I'll just show you here. So let's add the team group. And in this case, I know the size of the image. Now this doesn't have to match the exact sizes of your image as long as the aspect ratio matches. But if you're not exactly sure how to do that math, just make it the exact size of your images that are going to be going into the smart object, and it'll be fine. So in this case, I know that the team is 4800 by 2400. Now this template itself here, I call it a template, it's just a color fill layer, but this image itself is only 3000 pixels, and when you bring in your setup layers, if it's too large, it's going to automatically do the initial scaling to where it fits the edge of the template, so it's not going to be hanging off. But if you have to do any more scaling, then you'll just come in here and do it. We move these guides into place so they snap to this template or snap to these layers. At least I think this image was a 2:1 aspect ratio. And we'll find out here when we bring it in. So I've got a team that's cut out, and pretty sure it's a 2:1 aspect ratio at 4800 by 2400. So let's bring that team image in. If I remember where I put that. Okay, so on this, we can see that there is some empty space between the edges of the players and where the smart object was, which is where these guides are. But what it's doing when it's bringing in a team that's cut out is it's going to keep whatever empty space was there when it fits it. So if I open up that smart object, I can see that there is some empty space on this side. There's some empty space below. There's some empty space above. Let me see if that was, yeah, that was the same size, 4800 by 2400. So it's kept that empty space. So if you're setting up your cutout images and you know there's a certain amount of space you want around the image, then you can set up your template with that in mind and build your teams with that empty space in mind, and it's going to maintain that spacing. That's about it. And you know, one thing I'll show you, just since I'm here and I'm thinking about it, a lot of people are wondering how they would add transparency to either players or teams. And there's a lot of weird things that I see where people clip layers to shapes and stuff. Don't do any of that. If you want to add transparency to one of these setup layers, the best place is in this layer group with this mask. That's where you'll add the transparency. So I'm just going to add a gradient transparency right here in this mask. Draw some transparency. I got it backwards, so let me Control I here. So, and all you're doing, if I go into that layer mask, if I Control or Command click on that, Control click on Windows or Command click on Mac. Oops, excuse me, that's Alt click. Control click selects by transparency. Alt click goes into your mask. All right, so this is looking at this layer mask right here, and this is your transparency. So anywhere that's black is transparent, anywhere that's white is not transparent. Anywhere that's gray where that was a fade, that's going to fade your transparency. And so you can see we're fading the bottom of that team out. That's a very, very common thing to do. I do have some more videos scheduled where I'm going to be going over template setup, adding transparency, and doing some other things to your layers. But since I was here, I just wanted to show that because it is such a common question people have. And anyway, I think that about covers everything for the team setups. But be sure to watch the Memory Mate tutorials. I've got a few of those that I've not recorded just yet, but I'm going to be recording those over the next few days. So by the time you see this video, it's probably actually going to be on the website anyway. So be sure to watch those Memory Mate tutorials where I'll go over putting the player images combined with the team images and then running it all in batch. So anyway, thanks for watching.